everyone, and welcome back to my channel. This is Erica from Confessions of a Homeschooler, and I have had so many views on my rag quilt tutorial that I decided to do a second version of my rag quilt. So I will put a link for my first version below. It's just a standard square rag quilt, nothing fancy. It's perfect for beginners. This one is also extremely easy, but it's got a little bit of a twist. So today I'm going to be showing you how to make this beautiful pinwheel rag quilt. This again is also extremely easy. It's perfect for beginners, and it really only takes about a weekend to put together. This one I did out of flannel, and so it's super soft and fluffy, perfect for those cozy months that are coming up. So if you'd like to see how to make this quilt, make sure to stick around and we'll get started. Okay, the supplies for this project are super easy. So first off, you're gonna need either a layer cake of some kind of fabric or cut your own. These are just 10-inch squares. My layer cake had 42 10-inch squares in it. So however many yours has, you'll also want that same number in background squares. So I've got 42 colored squares in this layer cake, 10-inch by 10-inch, and then I also have 42 10-inch by 10-inch white background squares. You'll also need 42 of a backing fabric, and so I just used this one. This is from the Miss Kate line by Bonnie and Camille. This is actually a Marmalade layer cake bundle that I've been hoarding for a while. This is all flannel, all three of these, and this is also from Bonnie and Camille. You could, of course, use whatever fabric you like, but for this one I wanted it to be super soft and squishy, so I'm using all flannel. You'll also need 42 batting squares, and you can, of course, make your quilt whatever size you want, but whatever you are doing, just make sure that your batting is approximately 1 inch less on all four sides. So I've got 42 of everything. If you wanted to make it larger, you can make it larger. Just make sure you have the same number of all of those pieces of fabric. The other thing you're going to want is a nice rotary trimmer. This is my Olfa. I believe this is Fairy Pink or something like that. I will link it for you below. I have an aqua one as well. I just got this in my Fat Quarter Shop box though, and I love it. And inside I have the Olfa Endurance Blade as well, because they last a lot longer, and especially when you're cutting flannel and batting, they're really good. The next thing that you're gonna probably want to get yourself is a good pair of these snips. This is for cutting the fringe. These are a lot easier on the hand than regular scissors are. You're going to be doing a lot of fringe cutting, so I definitely suggest a pair of these. These ones are just the Fiskars. There's other brands out there. Just make sure they're sharp and have the handles like this, and that'll save you some trouble when you are cutting your fringe. The other thing that I suggest for this project is a couple of rulers. So I have this Creative Grids 15.5 by 15.5 inch ruler. It does not have to be this large, but a square ruler is really helpful, and you can cut anything smaller than 15.5 by 15.5. So I have this one and I use it all the time. It'll be really good for when we're trimming these blocks down towards the end. And then the other one that I like to use for this project is a 6.5 by 6.5. Again, this is another Creative Grids ruler. I just like these because they've got the tacky stuff on the back so they don't slide. And we're going to be cutting down all of our half square triangles into 6.5 by 6.5 inch squares. So just kind of a handy thing. If you don't have these two rulers, just use whatever you have on hand. Oh, and you'll also need your sewing machine thread. I'm just using 100% cotton thread and my Juki TL2000. You're also going to want a iron, and I will link all of the products that I use below. I have a Panasonic cordless iron and I love it. All right, I think that's it for supplies for this project. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I've set aside the squares for our batting and for the back side of our quilt, and we're gonna get started by making our pinwheels. So this is super easy and fun, and it actually makes 4 every time you do it, so it makes it go really fast. So what we're gonna do is we're going to take one of the squares for our front color, and then one of our solid squares, and we're just going to put these together, right sides together. But what we're going to do is take this over to our sewing machine, and we're going to sew 1/4 inch all the way around the outside of this square, and then we're going to come back and cut it from corner to corner diagonally, and that will give us 4 half square triangles. Okay, so here's our square. We sewed 1/4 inch all the way around all 4 sides, and now we are just going to take our ruler and lay it diagonally and cut that way, and then also diagonally this way. Okay, and that is going to leave us with 4 half square triangles. We're going to repeat that process with all 42 of our layer cake pieces and our backing pieces. So one of your layer cake and one of your backing. Do that for all of them until you have all 42 of them changed into 4 half square triangles. All right, and then I have just taken my half square triangles really quickly and pressed them to the dark. As long as you press everything towards the dark fabric, then your seams will nest nicely when you go to assemble your half square triangles. The next thing that we need to do really quickly is just chop off these little doggy ears. Now, since we're dealing with flannel, I do like to square up my blocks at this point, and so I will grab one of my square rulers and just trim these down. And these should trim down to 6.5-inch squares. And just because it's flannel and it gets kind of wonky, stretchy, and things like that. You can also use starch if you like, but I don't bother. I just trim down my blocks and then do my best while I'm sewing not to distort my pieces. Okay, so once we've trimmed down all of our half square triangle pieces, it's time to start assembling our pinwheels. And so you're gonna want to arrange your pinwheels like this. Now you can either keep all of the same fabric together or you can make them scrappy and swap them out with a different color. It's totally up to you. How I assemble pinwheels is I assemble the top 2 first. So I will sew these 2 together, and then I will sew these 2 together, and then I will sew the top row to the bottom row. And I'm just going to flip this one on top like that. And then I'll flip this one on top like that. And another nice thing, if you've pressed to the dark on both your fabrics, this seam right here should also nest, and you can kind of feel it with your fingers here. And so I just nest those together as easily as I can. I will stack these up like this and then bring them over to my sewing machine and just sew 1/4 inch down that one and then 1/4 inch down this one, and I'll just do that with all of my pinwheels. Okay, so I've sewn the top 2 together and the bottom 2 together, and I don't know if you can see here, but I still have this little thread holding these 2 together. I just chain piece when I'm doing several pieces like this, and it also keeps these 2 colors together so I don't accidentally get them twisted or anything like that. So the next thing we're gonna do, and I pressed this one going this way and this one going this way so that my seams will nest. So I'm just going to flip them on top of each other, and then as you can see here, my seams are going opposite directions. So that makes for a little bit less bulk, okay? And so I'm gonna just take this over to the sewing machine and sew 1/4 inch down this line. And here we go. As you can see, we have a really nice center point. All of the points are lining up here, and we have our first pinwheel done. Now we just need to repeat that process with all 42 panels and come up with 42 different colored pinwheels. Okay, now that we have finished all of our pinwheels, we are going to get to the fun part, and that is making our quilt sandwiches. So we're going to take one of our backing pieces, and I'm putting it right side down, so this is wrong side up. We're going to take one of our batting pieces and just kind of center it. This doesn't have to be perfect. Just kind of, you know, roughly center it in there. And then take one of your pinwheels and place it on top. And then you can kind of do whatever you want here. I'm just going to do a stitch in the ditch this way and this way just to form an X on this. It holds the batting in place and just kind of keeps everything from moving around. You could certainly quilt these little blocks if you want. Do whatever you want. Just do it to all of them. And then when we get back, I'll show you how to assemble the rag quilt. Okay, so here that is. Can't really see it too much on the front. You can kind of see the X on the back. And then I'm just going to do that to the rest of the stack of pinwheels. All right, guys, here is our stack of pinwheels, and they're all sewn together. And now we just need to assemble them. All right, so now comes the fun part. I'm probably going to lay all these out on the floor to just kind of arrange them in colors, but essentially you're going to want to arrange your pinwheels however you want. Okay, and then instead of putting right sides together like you normally do when you're quilting, we're actually going to place the wrong sides together like this, and we're gonna sew down this strip about a 1/2 inch. I wouldn't suggest going any less than a 1/2 inch. You could go a little bit more if you want. We're gonna just go ahead and sew right down this, and then when we open it up, it's going to give you this kind of look like this. And those are gonna be what our forms our rag, and then we'll just snip those with scissors and we'll be done. So I'm gonna go ahead and lay out my quilt, figure out how I want to sew that, and then I'll show you how to sew these pieces together. I'm starting actually at the crease right here, so about a 1/2 inch in. I'm gonna do a back stitch there and at the end. That's it. So I'm just gonna keep going on the rest of the quilt. Okay, so I've got my first row done, and I just wanted to kind of show you what it should be looking like. So you've got your seams here, so they're kind of sticking up like that, and then you've got your back seams here. Okay, so I'm just gonna finish sewing my rows together and I'll meet you back here. Okay, so here are my rows. I've gotten them all sewn up and I have 2 laid out here for you. And we're gonna just do the same thing we did when we put our blocks together. We are going to sew these with the back sides touching, so that we then have something that kind of looks like this. Okay, so like that, where you've got the back sides touching. So as you can see, right sides are out on both sides. We're going to line up these seams as best we can. It doesn't have to be perfect, and do a 1/2 inch stitch all the way down. The other thing I like to do, since it's super bulky, is use these Wonder Clips to just clip my seams so it doesn't get too far off. And if I can, I will nest them. So much bulk here that just helps a little bit. Another little tip I forgot to mention is that whenever I'm doing a seam that's more than my regular 1/4 inch seam, I'll usually stick a piece of washi tape just right here on my faceplate. That way I can just pay attention to the tape and not have to worry about getting mixed up with all the lines that are on here. Okay guys, so this is basically what your quilt should be looking like. We only have 2 steps left and we're done with this quilt. So step number 1 is to now run a sealing stitch all the way around all 4 corners of your quilt, and that's just going to close up these edges. So just a same 1/2 inch in all the way around the edges, and then the last step to do is just clip all of our little ruffles here and we're done. Alright guys, so I am done sewing around all 4 edges, and so as you can see, I just have this stitch line that went all the way around just to seal off everything. And now comes the fun part. Get out your scissor snips. And I like to just put on a good movie, honestly. And then you're going to snip all the way around the outside. And I just snip in, let's see if I can show you here, about this far, and about, it's probably a little bit less than a 1/2 inch apart or so. And you're just gonna go around the entire outside of your quilt doing that. You're also gonna do the same thing here. And when I get to these parts where it's sewn, you could stop, backstitch here and backstitch here, so these aren't, it's just kind of a hassle. So I just clip carefully on both sides of it so that they can kind of come up. So you could do it the other way if you wanted, but we're just going to snip all of these seams and all along the outside of your quilt. So, and I'm just going to keep doing that. And when you're snipping, just make sure that you don't snip into your stitch line. So there's probably about maybe a 1/4 inch from my stitch line or so. I get close, but not so close that you're cutting through your stitch line. Okay, and you're going to want to do that all the way around your whole quilt. And this flannel can be a little bit tougher to cut, so just take your time. Put on a good movie, and you're gonna want to just snip all of these seams on the entire quilt. And then all you have to do is throw it in the wash, and these will fray up nicely and kind of crinkle up for you, and you'll have yourself a rag quilt. Okay guys, your quilt should now be looking something like this. And if you've used quilting cotton or anything else, you know, other than like flannel that doesn't really fray too much, then yours will fray a little bit more than mine. But either way, these get kind of all crinkly and super fun and cute looking. And here's the back side. I added a different one on just the backs of the blues just to give it a little pop of color on the back. Alright guys, so here's our completed rag quilt. As you can see, this quilt was super easy and fun to make. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you'd like to see any other tutorials, make sure to leave a comment below. I'm probably going to get some questions about this fabric. This is actually Marmalade. It was a flannel layer cake by Bonnie and Camille. This one is unfortunately out of print, but they have a ton of fun flannel layer cakes that Moda puts out every year. So just go check and I'm sure you'll find one that you like. Anyway, thanks for joining me for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and I will see you next time.